Exploring the unknown, from conspiracies to mysteries. You are entering the conspiracy sector.
Well, welcome everyone to this very special program. I'm your host, Aubrey Batchelor. Sailing this amazing ship of knowledge with me is Chris Jacobs, and you are entering the conspiracy sector. Well, let's just start this off the right way. Let me ask something here. Let me communicate here with my planchette. Should I pour my morning cup of coffee in my conspiracy sector mug, or shouldn't I? The planchette says yes. The communication board says drink your caffeine. Today, our topic is spirit boards or the Ouija board. And if the name Ouija, it literally, will spark into you if you've ever played with one or if you're frightened out by them or too scared to touch one. That word in itself has created mysteries, it's created drama, it's created stories and legends that will live forever. And thanks to Hollywood like normal, I think, and business corporations, and mixed with the interest of people wanting to communicate with the dead in the afterlife. I don't think this supposed toy, children's toy, is never going to go away. And you know, I, researching and talking to all the experts of talking boards, you know, everyone that I've came across says they're 100% genuine, real device that you can talk to, but there's appropriate ways, like anything, of opening and closing sessions, making sure you don't invite anything in. It's an amazing topic, and really the sky's the limit when it comes to what you can do with a Ouija board.
Yeah. I always say caution this. I always say don't use these because they were made, essentially by the spiritualist movement to bring in like jinn, demons, and things of that nature. Granted, somebody might create some variation of it at some point that is completely neutral from all of that because people are becoming very talented now in this area and very wise to it. So I don't doubt a good version of it outside the original premise could be created. But I even looked this up this morning. The history on this, I wasn't taken aback, but I realized I was getting synchronicities towards this.
Hmm.
It's associated. Actually, I'm going to bring this up real fast here. Which I found this interesting. I got this off of the AI overview for Google, and then there's another one.
Hey, real quick while you say that, I have to intrude on that. I've literally been talking the last 2 weeks about this Google AI overview. It's like I'm not a big fan of AI because I'm a firm
No,
believer that like the human mind is better than any computer. It's just, a human created
it has to
it.
be used wisely. It has to be used wisely, like anything.
But it is freaky. Like I was just joking. You can ask anything, any made up question, and it'll give you an answer. Like
In formula,
anything.
what it does is it grabs all the possible responses to that and collates them and gives you the answer. Yeah.
It's nuts. I was just thinking about that because we first started seeing this AI overview thing about a year ago or so, I think, when it started to get popular in the search engines. And now I'm like, everything that I do, I'm like, well, thanks, Google AI. Thanks, Google AI. Thanks, Google AI. Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
It's creepy. Oh yeah, it's very creepy. It can be misused like with anything, but it's appropriate you brought that up because yeah. Oh yeah, I don't completely trust it, but I know when the historical information's good. But
Hmm.
but it can pull from multiple sources.
Now, I'm surprised that we haven't heard of people. I think I have heard a little bit of using AI as a communication device, like
Oh,
a
most
talking
definitely,
board.
I've heard of it. Yeah. Can
Yeah.
Galactics and Spirit use it like they do the Ghost Box? Absolutely, yes. But there is so much garble in there. They can integrate synchronicity in it. ETs do it too. I've seen it several times. But it's 99% garble, and then you have a little bit in there that's legitimate. I recognize the legitimate ones, but also the AI sometimes will learn that you've pulled from a legitimate source and then throw that into its response too. So
Hmm.
it learns. It's like in Dune with the thinking machines, that humans battle it in the Dune lore. where they're constantly battling thinking machines. Now, do I doubt that it could be used for good, like in Star Trek? No, it can be used for good, but it has to be retooled. But also I wanted to say, yeah, this on here the we okay. This is actually I found interesting because this coincides with things Joanna and I have talked about here in the past, recently, like with Houdini and whatnot. So this is the Ouija board originated in the United States in the late 19th century, emerging from the American spiritualist movement. It was patented in 1891 by Elijah Bond with the help of Charles Kennard and William Fuld, among others. I'll get to that in a second. The name Ouija was reportedly given to Helen Peters, a medium who claimed the board itself spelled out the word when asked the name, which that's suspicious in and of itself because of the fact you don't know what source that name came from. While rooted in the desire to communicate with the dead, the Ouija board was also a commercial venture capitalizing on the popularity of spiritualism at the time, which I found interesting. I'll read a couple of these things before I get to another article I found here. But which I found interesting, spiritualism and the talking boards. The Ouija board origins are intertwined with the spiritualist movement, a belief system that held that the living could communicate with the dead. Talking boards, precursors to the Ouija, were already in use. The official Ouija board was before the original Ouija board was patented. Excuse me. Baltimore origins. The Kennard Novelty Company, formed by Charles Kennard and others, began manufacturing Ouija boards in Baltimore, Maryland. The name Ouija, Helen Peters, the medium who was testing the board with Bond, claimed the board spelled out Ouija when asked its name. When asked what it meant, the board supposedly responded, "Good luck," which that could be taken two different connotations, like good luck or good luck, meaning we just entangled you, good luck with that. So meaning to some kind of curse that could pass lineages. Like, so one could take that connotation in two completely different ways there. And not just for mediums, while the desire to contact the dead was a driving force behind the Ouija board's popularity, the men who patented and popularized it were businessmen, not necessarily spiritual.
And see, I think that was part of it too. I don't know whether like the release of it as a product came out of genuosity from the people of believing that it was an actual talking board, or if they just wanted to make a profit. Because at the same time, people were flocking to actual mediums and paying them $4 or $5 at the time,
Yeah,
per session, when they could go buy their own board for $2 or $3 and do their own session at home whenever they wanted to.
yeah, and also this coincides with the same time frame Houdini was trying to oust the spiritualist movement. This is the same time frame, relatively the same time frame. So
Let's fast forward to from Houdini to a guy by the name of Ed Dames, the remote viewer. Even he was talking about like a Ouija board as a form of remote viewing in a way, because you're here and then they're over there and you're connecting to them through the other side. So they're even like a person like Houdini, a magician, somebody like Ed Dames, a remote viewer, is mentioning references to the Ouija board. And then we have all these other people that we're going to get into too. There's a lot of prominent figures that have revolved around the Ouija board, really, and had sessions.
Oh yeah. This I found this quite interesting. I knew some of the history with the spiritualist movement, but I did not know some of the in-depth stuff. And there's this article that I found from the BaltimoreMagazine.com it's called "Not Dead Yet." After 125 years, the Ouija board's Baltimore origin story has been unraveled. Research shows it works too, kind of. That's what the article says. And I will read just a little bit of this down to I got to find where to stop here. Okay, I'm not going to read that far. Okay. Okay, yeah, this people can go and read this. I'll just give the bit of the backstory, but I'll put a link in the descriptor so people can read the whole thing because it's quite lengthy. So, and the heading is, in the 19th century, people had a different relationship to death. So that's the subheading. So, okay, I went down too far. Okay. Charles Kennard always had an eye out for a chance to make a buck, but he was not the greatest nor the luckiest businessman. It appears that he wasn't the most honest guy either. The second child of a successful Delaware merchant, Kennard moved to Maryland's Eastern Shore, and in the 1880s, after developing secret bone mix recipes for fertilizer, and in fairness, everyone in the fertilizer business claimed it was a secret recipe, following initial success, his Chestertown plant went to auction due to a combination of drought and competition and debt. But all was not lost. A Prussian immigrant named E.C. Reich kept an office next to Kennard's on the first floor of the four-story building wood frame hotel in Chesterton's tiny business district. A furniture maker turned coffin maker turned undertaker. Not a typical
Say that again.
Yeah, it was a furniture maker turned coffin maker turned undertaker, which I found not a typical career progression for
Yeah.
the
Typical, every 7 years he switches jobs.
Yeah, it switches job. This shows that this is the dubious origins of some of this. This is
He can't please a living with his cabinet, so he's just got to make coffins for the dead.
Yeah. Oh, I just switched it to coffins, dear. You know, that kind of
I
thing.
told you I wanted this kitchen and bath done in 3 days. It don't look good.
Wright was also an introvert, a tinker, and Kennard had another plan. This is interesting. The backstory. 2 generations earlier, a pair of girls in upstate New York, named the Fox sisters, claiming to be mediums able to interpret mysterious knocks from the other side, had launched a spiritualist movement that continued to hold sway across the country. In fact, in the aftermath of the Civil War, with so many husbands, fathers, and sons lost to the conflict's bloody battles, spiritualism, the belief the dead can speak to the living, had only gained steam with people desperate for connection to departed loved ones and greater meaning for their own lives.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Same thing with World War II. It kind of had a rebound in World War II when everybody was dying. And there was one account. We'll get into some accounts too a little bit later. I found a random article online with people claiming their accounts. I was reading one where the soldier who was being sent to Vietnam asked the talking board if he was going to die in Vietnam. The board just plainly said yes, and he died. So,
well, somebody also is told that they're going to die, and they believe that they'll find a way to make it happen too.
And see, that's the thing too. You know, that's like the Tulpa belief, or you know, just statistical belief. You know, because a lot of people died in Vietnam. So I imagine, you know, there's probably what, I don't know the exact numbers, but I'd say 1 out of every 5 that was sent over there died. Probably 20% of them died. Maybe I don't know the numbers, but a lot died.
Oh,
so, you know, right there out the bat, he's got a 20% chance of, you know, of dying, you know.
Oh, exactly. There's a famous line from Star Trek Next Generation where Picard is basically touring the ship, because this is when they're basically fighting the Borg, and they're hiding in a nebula from them, and they're a superior and enemy. So what happens is they're hiding, and Picard is touring, basically walking around the ship trying to figure out what to do. And Guinan comes up to him, and he goes, "Oh, I'm basically touring the ship." And basically, captains did that before a battle, and Guinan goes, "Before a hopeless battle." And she goes, "You know, the funny thing is, if a man is convinced he's going to die, he'll find a way to make it happen." That's a famous line from Star Trek Next Generation. And Best of Both Worlds was the Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2 was the name of that one, but it was in Part 1. But that's a famous line from Star Trek, and that is absolutely true. If you're convinced, you've created that manifestation. There's also a famous case, before I get too far off the marker here, there is a famous case of a woman that this was a special that Josh Gates did with some of his shows. And this was a special on death. And what ended up happening was this woman had a dream where some beings came to her and said her son was going to die on his 18th birthday. And to me, that's suspicious. That's just some kind of soul-reaving assholes that are doing something somewhere. Demonic to alien to whatever. Pirate is basically a good term for that. But dimensional in this case. What ended up happening was the woman, of course, went on remembering this in the back of her head. When her son was ready to turn 18, she told him. And then he nods, and then around his 18th birthday, he dies within a week of turning 18 or so. And what ended up happening was, by telling him, by not only believing it herself, but by passing that manifestation on to him. She basically put a nail in his coffin at that point.
Well,
And that falls under that same premise. And I've always used this because that's all the consent somebody else out there needed to finish the job off. See, and they didn't want him as a child; they wanted him as a 5-year-old. This is when he was 5. Before, when he was an 18-year-old, they wanted that for the energy and the genetics. You know, you can go into the alien territory with that, but it's they abduct people too, obviously permanently sometimes. But with that, this falls under the same premise. So, but yeah, let me read a little more from this, and then I'll pass this over here. Let me see here. Okay. In It's in this context in 1886, during the period of Kennard and Reich sharing a hallway, that newspaper reports began appearing about a talking board phenomenon sweeping Ohio, including an Associated Press story that ran in the local Kent County News. It's also about this time, according to a later Baltimore American story, that Kennard and Reich, most likely inspired by the AP account, began collaborating and making at least a dozen of their talking boards. Now, now I'm going to fast forward here a little bit here. We'll go here. Basically, it had been rejected a number of times by different investors. After numerous rejections, Elijah Bond, a local attorney who claimed his sister-in-law was a strong medium, finally took an interest. Soon enough, the Kennard Novelty Company, which incorporated the day before Halloween 125 years ago, you see it's a marketing thing there, manufacturing Ouija boards much as they appear today. Bond was right about his sister-in-law too, Helen Peters, who proved convincing enough with Kennard's new talking board to win over the skeptical U.S. Patent Office. She not only gets credit for earning the stamp of legitimacy from the federal government, certifying the board delivered as promised, but also for receiving the Ouija name from the board itself, which told her the strange word meant good luck, as I said before. In truth, this is what this person's opinion is. In truth, the name Ouija was written on the necklace locket that Peters was wearing at the time. So it's actually unknown as to what it actually means, and we just know by what she said it means. So at that time. Now, one more part here, which I found interesting. The story of the Ouija board, however, is more than a tale of snake oil salesmen duping the Victorian masses, or subsequently a game of harmless fun at a millionaire junior high sleepovers. While it remains an amazingly enduring pop culture phenomenon tied to the rise of the horror movie Paranormal Industrial Complex, its saga is also about the universal desire to find answers to life's biggest questions, the history of psychology, and even the development of neuroscience. So this is how this went into the scientific area. And it's always been a board game. This is a quote by him. It's always been a board game, parlor game, but it has always been more than a board game for some people. Murch says. Ironically, the writer of that, his name's Murch, by the way. In the 19th century, people had a much different relationship to death than we do today. It was much closer to their everyday experience. Now we do everything we can in hopes of avoiding aging, let alone engage any real thoughts of death. But in the 1800s, people only lived to be 50 years old. Mothers would have 12 children and 6 of them would die. Their parlor rooms were also their funeral rooms. I'm going to fast forward here. And there's only a couple more paragraphs here I'll look at. Not surprisingly, perhaps, there's a darker side or two buried in Ouija's origin story. There always is when money is at stake, and by the early 1890s, some 2,000 Ouija boards were already being sold a week. William Fuld, who worked for and invested in the Kennard Novelty Company and eventually gained control of the Ouija business after the founder crashed out too early, went on to make millions manufacturing the board in Baltimore and elsewhere, but only after his brother was cut out of the company. Their ensuing lawsuits were no mere spat. William's brother, Isaac, ironically, became so embittered that he had his baby daughter exhumed and relocated from the Fuld family gravesite during a cemetery renovation. The two sides of the family would not speak for 96 years. So that there was already
96 years.
96 years. And they eventually came back on this together. And this also went into Hollywood. We know of all the paranormal.
Yeah, and he kind of brought it up. Civil War had a big production. The World War II, more interest, and then the movie The Exorcist comes out, and
Yes, yes, yes.
boom.
Oh yeah, yeah. It says right here. I'll fast forward a little bit. But over time, the relative innocence of the Ouija board, or at least its non-partisan relationship between good and evil, gave way to more sinister reputation as Hollywood began utilizing it for darker purposes, aka satanic Hollywood. Everybody knows about that part. But after The Exorcist, in which actress Linda Blair's character began, explains to her mom, played by Ellen Burstyn, how she used the family's Ouija board to ask questions of Captain Howdy, the demon who eventually takes possession of her soul.
Hmm.
The board's occult status was cemented. So this one, let's see here. This one paragraph I found quite interesting. I gotta find it. Give me a second. Okay, it's a long thing. I'm just only picking the best parts out of here. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Give me 2 seconds here. Okay. Okay, here we are. Since then, it has shown up in more than 20 films and made countless appearances in the ever-growing number of paranormal-themed TV shows. Forums around Ouija-associated phenomena populate the internet, of course. Most recently, the 2014 movie Ouija did so well at the box office that Ouija 2 is already in the works. When it was released last fall, the movie so dramatically boosted board sales that petitions by evangelical Christian groups to ban the Ouija board started popping up again. Catholic.com. A lay-run Catholic apologetics and evangelical website describes Ouija as far from harmless, which normally I don't agree with the church a whole lot, but in this instance I will. Also, when I found out when Parker Brothers bought the brand in the 60s, they moved the headquarters for selling Ouija to Salem, Massachusetts, capitalizing on the whole witch burning thing. And I found out bloodlines that came from the witches from Salem. Will divert slightly because this ties this into some of the modern day, lineage curse stuff that's going on. There is ties to some of the lines from Salem. The reason some of them were actually executed, aside from land grabbing, of course, by politicians and whatnot, declaring them witches. It turned out somebody was trying to weed out certain bloodlines, so they eventually can find people with certain talents now to integrate them into programs such as like your Stargate program, your remote viewing programs, your secret space programs, anything that the government now can exploit. In that area. It's like Darth Vader looking for the Force-sensitive children. It ties over into some of the Ouija's history and to Houdini, by which then fought the spiritualist movement. I found out the FBI hired him to root out what we call the New Age Mafia, and to look for people not only he looked for fake channelers. He didn't believe really a whole lot of it. What the spiritualist movement evolved into now is, of course, you have the New Age movement, which was created by the CIA back in the mid-90s. They call it the New Age scam, but there's good things that came out of it. It was a regurgitation of Christianity. But at the same time, they went from fake channelings in some areas to channeling negative sources. And they've always kind of done both, but it's more out in the open because there's all these different demigods and gods that people channel. And, I channel sources too, but I rigorously vet this up and down before I do any of these things. Houdini, when back in his day, they say he died, of course, to the punch to the stomach, the student gave him. But at the time, the spiritualist movement was trying to get him into a hospital where they could actually kill him, I found out. His last words were not what they said it was. Like Wikipedia basically says, let me see here. Let's see. I lost it. Okay. All right, I'm going to back this up one little bit here. All right. Huh. Okay. Hmm. Okay, apparently that got okay. They said his last words in some instances were "I'm tired of fighting." In other ones, it said that poor boy didn't know what he did, kind of thing. It's dubious because he said none of these things. But
Hmm.
they actually murdered him, and then they wrote the text that said he said what he said. They wanted him away from it. They caused the peritonitis, and they murdered him via a medical condition.
Hmm.
So. Which shows how crazy some of these people are. But there's sources now channeling dubious things, and then there's some sources saying they're channeling when they're not. You also have the intelligence movement. You know, you have the CIA operatives. You have a group called the Aviary that's out there. This is where you get the false, some of the false SSP insiders. Like you have your Corey Goods and you have your Richard Doty's and all of these type of characters who Doty fractured the UFO movement and basically made it so they fight amongst themselves. Corey Good put in a false testimonial about him being a secret space program operative, was caught, and then basically told the government he had lied about the whole thing, trying to discredit people that went through real things. This is what these operations in motion. But I know I deviated from the signed thing, but this is how far this has gone in this area. But Ouija boards, I don't recommend them at this point in history, using them for research unless you're investigating that type of what entanglements do and how curses operate. Because curses can move slowly over a period of time. You don't know it's there, like the elbow bumping, karma swapping, destiny swapping type of thing. You get a demon in your presence and it diminishes other parts of life. These tend to conjure Jinn and Draco, of which are famous demon types that can literally pluck the luck threads from you, or what I call them, and then divert your path. So any demonic life form can really do that. But yeah, that's essentially what I got there. So what do you have?
Well, let me take one more sip of coffee here.
Mhm.
Cheers to the conspiracy sector, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna
When
get
you were mid talk there, I was looking up on Google on my phone. I just had an epiphany. I just wondered one of the main I consider her a like the princess of the spiritualist movement in a way, Sarah Winchester
hmm
and the Winchester Mystery House. But there's no. I know that she was doing seances, but there was no evidence of her ever playing with a Ouija board,
No, no.
or anything along that line, which shocks me.
Yeah, that actually shocks me. And when Price came in there to try to debunk the whole thing, he really couldn't. He was the father of the debunking paranormal movement as well, the skeptical side of it. Uh,
Hmm.
that's how you get paranormal groups. That's the birth of a lot of the paranormal groups and the procedures behind paranormal study and everything. But they mixed Sarah Winchester's experiences with Price's expertise, and then voila, you've got the paranormal
Hmm.
movement.
Hmm.
Uh, it's a fusion of both those. The movie that came out with Helen Mirren was actually pretty decent. Winchester talked about how there was even an earthquake at the time underneath the
Yeah.
house and all this that actually ripped it apart. Came to find out, though, I did put that question into our Q&A one time about Sarah Winchester. Why was she so haunted? Well, here's somebody from the spiritual movement that comes in, basically gives her a reading on how the spirits are angry with her about her husband's invention of the Winchester
Hmm.
rifle and the deaths behind it. That seed, again, like what happened with that boy at the 18th birthday thing I just said, seed planted her brain, and she was so sensitive and so psychically adept. Her psionic field brought in a lot of the very ghosts and the very spirits and the very demonic things that actually are within the Winchester house to this day. And it's basically a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you get into overprotectiveness, you're starting to conjure the very thing, so, manifestation-wise, that you're not wanting. Like, say that she was told if she kept building the house that she'd appease these spirits. Well, in the very thing, when eventually when the whole thing stopped, she died. Well, what ended up happening, I found out she was actually trapping the very things that she was trying to keep out of there. So there is a mix between, there's a fine line between manifestation, intention, and conjuring things. So she was very adept, very, very good at what she did energetically. There, you can confuse demons and spirits and stuff to wander a house that has doors to nowhere and stairs to nowhere, things of this nature. But with something like that, of course, I went there myself. I found a bunch of stuff in there. So obviously the technique worked. But at the same time, how many came in because of her psionic light that was like a beacon, too? So that's a question of that whole yin yang has to be addressed there. The more I analyze this, but it started out with a psychic telling, one could call that influencing too, according to Price and according to others. One could say that that's influencing, and therefore her psionic ability brought them all in. One could definitely say that. So I'm not disagreeing with either side of this spectrum, the both psychic spectrum and the skeptical spectrum on this. But yeah, interesting movie. If people want to go see that Winchester, look that up with Helen Mirren. It's actually a decent movie, and it tells a history pretty good, actually, of the Winchester house.
There ain't too often that happens. It usually gets diluted.
Hollywood usually fucks it up in some way, and Hollywood should talk. They've been embroiled in the satanic garbage and the paranormal since its inception. So, so they should talk, about falsehoods and lies and all that. But everybody knows about the whole thing of adrenochroming to satanic rituals, all this other stuff. But yeah, this is essentially what some of these boards bring in. But like I said in the beginning, I don't doubt that someone could create one that's outside of all of that could be done safely. I have no doubt that's true. It's just that every time I've ever messed with one, this isn't based out of fear. This is based out of observation. Where I've seen messing with one, you get entangled. Unless you know how to revoke these entanglements, you're going to stay entangled. Unless you know how to do the trench working, you're not going to be able to detach from it. There are procedures like energetic procedures behind these things, opening, closing circle, all this other stuff. But with Ouija boards, the Kabbalist areas and some of the spirituals move, they made it so that it did one thing. It pumped out demons and jinn. Now, could some of that have been propaganda put in by these very organizations so people wouldn't connect to proper things? I could buy into that too. But at the very most of it, the whole point of this is people have also put that tulpa on this, that stigma on it. So could somebody safely use one of these? Not at this point, with people putting so much negative energy onto it as well, the manifestation of it. It's just too strong at this moment in time till people start to back away from that. So in this instance, the Catholic Church actually had a good point. But, and yes, I'm saying this, I actually don't care for the Catholic Church, but I'm just saying in this instance, they had a good point. But on the flip side, could something good be created that is not part of that? Yes. So I just say in this, I would not recommend a Ouija board, but there's also procedures. If you get caught or entangled into a demon curse or a jinn curse of some kind or generational curse, there are revocations you can revoke and deny their presence, like what we say about the Dreamtime revocation and revoking any all agreements made in Dreamtime with any malicious being and or beings. Go along those lines when you are dealing with stuff like that. I'm not, again, this is murky territory. This is virtually untested territory, but I know the entanglement area and how to get out of that. And so, and people always think they can beat demons at their own game and play this game with them, kind of thing. I wouldn't recommend that. Just be on the safe side, err the side of caution. But at the same time, I've run into a number of these different beings types to know what their strategies are and what the yin and yang to the whole thing is. So it's err on the side of caution, and in some instances, if you don't know what you're doing, don't. Essentially, don't play with fire. You're gonna get
when in doubt, don't play with it.
Yeah, it's like it's basically you're sticking not only a penny in the light socket, you're sticking a fork in the light socket that then basically corrupts a whole area, and everybody gets locked into that fork and light socket and repetitious entanglements and curses. You can spread that through an area and not realize it as well. You create a conduit, therefore you are opening yourself up to us in the Haitian people opened up to it. But with the Haitian religions, they believe conjuring something is a form of protection. You can program your energy to actually clear as you're walking through space, or you can program your energy and your subconscious mind to conjure as you're walking into a space, thinking that it's okay. The Haitian religions, I'm not dumping on Haitians, so do not send hate mail in, but they're into the whole destiny swapping with the elbow, bumping elbows, especially in New Orleans. They like to bump elbows. And that is a way of passing that energy volleyball to multiple people within their community. And it's an entanglement that then slowly starts to siphon your good fortune, quote unquote, off of you. Ouija boards will do the same if you don't know what the hell you're doing. I mean, there's skill involved, but just don't put that fork in the light socket. People always say it's generally just skill. I'm like, no, it's what it's also linked to whom created it as well. You got to know the origins of who created what. That's why I suggested this show topic. Uh, Knowing the history, you tend to want to, you tend to knowledge is power in that area, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
So what else you got, Albert?
Well, since you talked about kind of the origin deal here, I want to talk about one other person with all this. Apparently, hopefully I got the right thing. Let's go right here. And I want to talk about Aleister Crowley and his little bit of relationship with the board. And this comes from wiccanready.org. At first glance, the notorious Magnus and self-styled Great Beast 666 Aleister Crowley might seem an unlikely candidate for the Ouija board. Whatever else can be said of him, Crowley was a fearless and tireless explorer in the realms of the spirit. Although generally contemptuous of simple-minded and largely Christian-inflected populist movements such as spiritualism, which experienced several waves of popularity during his lifetime with its coming and going fads of automatism, ectoplasm, mediums, Ouija boards, and seances. He summed up his attitude to what he called spiritism with the single exclamation, fog, and made his distaste for what he considered the popular games of the uninitiated quite clear when he wrote for the New York-based paper The International in October of 1917. Here's a quote. Suppose a perfect stranger came into your office and proceeded to give orders to your staff. Suppose a strange woman walked into your drawing room and insisted on being a hostess. You would be troubled by this, yet people sit down and offer the use of their brains and hands, which are, after all, more important than offices and drawing rooms. To any stray intelligence that may be wondering about, people use the Ouija board without taking the slightest precautions. Kind of like what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
The Ouija board was at that time still a relatively recent arrival, introduced as little more than a popular game by an American entrepreneur in 1890. It wasn't until the turn of this century that it even acquired Ouija as a name. Trying to cash in on the vogue for all things Egyptian, it was suggested that it was an ancient word meaning good luck. But then it was later revealed to simply come from the French and German for yes being put together, oui and ja. It wasn't until it was taken up by spiritualist Pearl Curran around the First World War that it took a more otherworldly connotation. I'm sure everybody knows the basic idea is a board with letters of the alphabet, also numbers 0 to 9, and words yes to no for good measure. And even if you haven't dabbled yourself, we're all familiar with the basic premise, plot device of many lurid horror movie and spooky story. Getting together around the board with an upside down shot glass, if you want to be more authentic, a planchette, to launch an inevitably ill advised seance with the careless words, "Is there anybody there?" The aforementioned planchette is where the connection with spiritualism really starts to come in. The marketing suggested it was the invention of one Monsieur Planchette, but it is more likely that the word simply derives from the French for little plank. It was designed initially as a device to facilitate automatic writing, which was all the rage with psychic explorers of the late 19th century. And I also want to bring something up about automatic writing with another prominent figure, Nikola Tesla. His inventions would come to him in these psychic automatic writing things. He's just like writing with his eyes closed in the middle of the day. So it's like he's tapping into his own Ouija board. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there, anyway. Uh, So the roughly triangular or occasionally heart-shaped device was mounted on the small wall-bearing wheels and adapted to hold a pen or pencil that would enable the spirits to write messages while the medium or mediums simply rested their hand or hands upon it and watched it glide across the page. A similar process was instrumental in the automatic writing sessions of psycho-archaeologist Frederick Bligg Bond during his excavations at Glastonbury Abbey and claimed as the source of the insights prompted his surprisingly successful excavations. It was inevitable that somebody would combine the two, a Ouija board and planchette, sooner or later in seemingly spectacular results. So it's like peanut butter and jelly to get him to get a good sandwich.
Mm.
Sinister or silly as this may seem, there are more serious precedents for the talking board, despite its somewhat banal and commercial origins. The idea of the devices of some kind that enable contact with spirits, whether disembodied elements or ghosts of the dead, is in fact an old one. Long before the birth of Confucius, the Chinese made of this method of planchette-style automatism called Fuji to communicate with the spirits of their ancestors. Similar methods were and still are used in temples in Taiwan, where mediums known as qi xings work either alone or in pairs, sitting before a large tray of white sand, holding in their hands a V-shaped writing tool. After appropriate prayers, their hands begin to shake, and the implement allegedly starts writing out messages in the sand. In Greece, circa 540 BC, the philosopher Pythagoras was said to use a special talking table on wheels. With hands placed upon the table, it would move forward depending different signs and symbols. And Pythagoras or his pupil Philothaus would then interrupt the message to the writing audience as being divine relations, supposedly from an unseen world. There are references to similar practices in ancient Rome. The Emperor Valens had a trio of men executed who had been trying to determine the name of his successor by using a pendulum hung over a dish with the letters of the alphabet around the rim. And even some tribes of Native American Indians used a spirit board, which they called a squidle act, to help locate missing people and objects or receive messages from the spirit world. So, like remote viewing, like Ed Dames, help, locate missing people, give us a message of where this person's at.
Or
Down
like
the
the like
hill.
dowsing rods that you see as well, and also like pendulums as well. So it's essentially that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which way the pendulum swings.
Or it's a technique called scrying, is what it's called. Scrying.
Yeah, scrying. What is not so well known is that in private, Crowley, in fact, advocated the use of the Ouija board, at least by trained adepts, conveying quite a different attitude to followers such as Jane Wolfe and especially Charles Stansfield Jones. Jane Wolfe, 75 to 1958, a Hollywood actress in the days of the silent screen, went to Cefalù from 1920 to 23 after she and Crowley had pursued each other long distance via 2 year correspondence, from which apparently she was half expecting a spiritualist master and half expecting a lover. Thelemic scholar J. Edward Cornelius, to whose work I was introduced by the late Gerald Suster, of whom more later, wrote a detailed examination of Aleister Crowley and the Ouija board in his short book of the same name, to which I am greatly indebted. Cornelius writes that Jane Wolfe regularly used the Ouija board and said that she credits some of her greatest spiritual communications to the use of this implement. But I have to admit, my researches have turned up little of any use. I'm sure that Mr. Cornelius had the benefit of access to unpublished papers, but all I have been able to find is a reference in her Cephalou diaries to having open battle with the Ouija board and automatic writing to defend herself from psychic attack of a decidedly sexual nature. She would wake from unwelcome, wet dreams with the lingering feeling of penetration, usually occurring in the aftermath of her monthly period. Wolf was eventually able to first identify the oppressing entity as one John Myers, then presumably fend off this unwelcome astral advances, which apparently left her facing the stark choice of a sanitarium or marriage, at least according to the doctor that she consulted. As for C.S. Jones, 86 to 1950, better known by his magical name of Fartur Akkad, he was an English accountant who joined the Argenteum Astrum, the first reading the equinox of 1909. His career later took him to British Columbia, where he became Crowley's AA and OTO rep for Canada. Among other things, he is remembered for esoteric writings about the Kabbalah, the Holy Grail, the Egyptian revival, and his work anticipating the controversial future Aeon of Mot. His magical record, Master of the Temple, impressed Crowley enough that he published it in the Equinox, uh, and for quite a while, the great beast considered Akkad the magical sun and heir. Most of all, it was felt that his actions in taking the oath of the abyss had enabled Crowley to advance to the grade of Magnus. Where we are concerned with here, however, is the discussion that Jones and Crowley had about the subject of the Ouija, which is frequently mentioned in their unpublished letters. Also, in passing, Jones' 1923 work, Crystal Vision Through Crystal Gazing, in which he notes that the relationship to scrying, the case of the Ouija board, applies equally to the crystal. Jones also made the significant comparison of the roughly triangular shape planchette used for automatic writing, or in conjunction with the Ouija board with the traditional triangle of the art used in Solomonic magic for the containment of spirits that has been conjured by the magician for its safety of his magical circle, as Crowley had observed in magic and the theory and practice. Here's his quote. And in 1970, or you invoke a god into a circle, you evoke spirit into the triangle. In 1917, Akkad experimented with the board as means of summoning rather than the usual spirits of the dead. The angles of the famed Eknoian system of Dr. John Dee and Dr. Edward Kelly. Crowley himself had first encountered the system during this time in the Golden Dawn and had worked it extensively with his lover and disciple, the poet Victor Newberg, scrying the Aetherius as they traversed the desert of Algeria, as recorded in the Vision and the Voice. Jones shared his discoveries with his guru, of course, and Crowley replied, quote, your Ouija board experiment is rather fun. You see how very satisfactory it is, but I believe things improve greatly with patience. I think you should keep to one angle and make the magical preparations more elaborate. Over the years, both became so fascinated by the board that they even talked about marketing their own design. And I could only imagine what his board would have been like, and that was the crowning or the crowning achievement to this cake is if he would have created a board, who knows what it could have been.
Oh yeah, really.
Your Ouija board experiment. Over the years became marking their discussions to a head in a letter dated February 21st, 1919, in which Crowley, ever the hustler, told Jones, "A Ouija board, I offer you the basis of 10% of my net profit. If you are to accept this, responsible for the legal protection of the ideas and the marketing of the copyright designs, I trust that this may be satisfactory to you. I hope to let you have the material in the course of a week." In March, Crowley wrote to Akkad to inform him, "I'll think up another name for a Ouija." But their business venture never came to fruition, and Crowley's design, along with his new name for the board, is sadly lost to posterity. What has come down to us, however, is that the Master Theron's instructions for what he saw as the correct use of the Ouija board as an instrument of magical inquiry in the same year that the Farder Akkad began his experiments, Crowley penned a short article, The Ouija Board, a note for the aforementioned German-owned The International, which he was writing for in New York, in which he sets out his position clearly and simply. Quote, there is, however, a good way of using this instrument to get what you want, and is to perform the whole operation in a considerate circle so that undesirable aliens cannot interfere with it. You should then employ the proper magical invocation in order to get your circle just the one spirit you want. It is comparatively easy to do this. A few simple instructions are all that is necessary, and I shall be pleased to give these free of charge to anyone who cares to apply. The basic message is that if you consider the planchette an analog to the triangle of art that traditionally accompanies the magic circle as a locus for the evocation of spirits, you place the Ouija board and its planchette at the center of the circle of protection. Perform an appropriate cleansing, such as the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram or one of the Crowley-themed variants. Then proceed to invoke specific named entities. These entities can be tested by questioning and examination. Constrained to answer via the medium of the planchette and board. If one wanted to follow in Akkad and Crowley's footsteps and use the Ouija as a means of engaging in Enochian angels, I would suggest also warding your ritual working space with the elemental watchtowers at the end of the four quarters. Then proceeding with the appropriate calls or keys as corresponding to the level of being you wish to communicate with. Obviously, starting with Earth, and then working your way up as it is. This, at least, is the version that was outlined to me by Gerald Suster in London in the 1980s, based on his discussion with Israel Ringardi and examination of the Crowley Akkad correspondence, and I understand to be the basis of his own practice in this area. And this article is offered to Gerald's memory. Thelemit, teacher, scholar, gentleman, and friend. So
What Crowley was referring to is creating a safe space for your spells, kind of like the whole Doctor Strange in the mirror dimension thing, where it's a safe space. What Crowley was suggesting was a safe space, and also the fact that Ouija meant yes and yes. What that also tells me is like what I said with the good luck or good luck. In this instance, it's basically if you're giving consent, you're saying yes 2 times like this. So putting yes and yes together in German and French. This basically this made sense to me because in some instances, some of these beings all they need is a yes and then duplication yes to basically to come across. So that's like the scientific method where you do one thing once and do it again to prove concept. This is the energetic version of that. Why they said yes and yes. That's the energetic version of that. So, which I find fascinating that was chosen like that. But do you notice how some of the origins are more dubious? But even though Aleister Crowley was brilliant, some of his things went into the beginnings of Scientology along with L. Ron Hubbard as well. So I know that's kind of a bad word as far as YouTube goes here. So, but they monitor communications so that they aren't talked bad about. But one of the worst calamities that happened was someone hacked into the GIC site that we have, GIC.show, because of the fact we mentioned Scientology in there. They got into there. So if you talk badly about them, they have a militant arm. But there's also with Crowley's work, what he was saying about the spells, about the four corners like that. That is actually some practices that I use for protection and containment. When you're clearing a property, it's always prudent to do some form of that, where you are making a quarantine dome or something, like some kind of mantra or something on the corners. We use the law of one to quarantine a property. And we also, because what the premise of the law of one states is, and I'll say it and then I'll tell you why this actually applies to this. It basically is the law of one. When one is harmed, all are harmed. When one is helped, all are helped. So therefore, in the name of who I am, and I am one with all there is, I give thanks that it's done. So be it, and so it is. And you can add other things in there as well. And what this is doing is anything evil that reads this, whatever they're trying to do to you automatically hits them with the same force. So having that as a protective thing on the house, that's one of the most powerful phrases we've run across is the law of one. And this is not to be associated with the humble law of one material with the Ra group material. That has nothing to do with the other one. This is more like basically you hit me, I hit you, or basically I'm rubber, you're glue, whatever you throw at me, it bounces back and hits you kind of thing. It's basically that a more fancy version of that. So some people would disagree with me on that, but so Crowley in that instance was correct, and I also see where he said the area of focus, where he said like how a doctor has an area of focus. I've seen psychics, mediums, channelers, trench workers. They all seem to have an area of focus or an area of expertise. Where don't spread yourself too thin, focus on the aptitude you have in this particular field. Like psionics, for instance. Psionics involves psychic, medium, telekinetic, remote viewing, all of these types of subjects, clairvoyant, clairaudient, and you've heard of all the clairs too. They fall under the one topic heading of psionics. And so what Crowley said was actually true in that respect, where you have to focus on a particular section of the magic. And you even see this in some of your games like Skyrim and all this, where you see the magical college, and also your Harry Potter, where you have Hogwarts, where they're centering in a particular area. Like you have an order, you have a alchemist, you have all of these type of things. Also within the magical world in Skyrim, you also have you have the warriors, over here, fighters. And you have the magical community where you center on a particular area too. So what he said, that statement he made was actually quite profound. He was actually correct there. So, but I haven't dug too much into the Crowley history as much more than the Scientology link. But that statement I can tell you is true for any respect, and also the fact that that he basically opened and closed circles. He seemed to be one of them that actually created some of these procedures in our world to begin with. Now, the thing with Pythagoras, I did not know about the thing of Pythagoras, where, of course, mathematically, I think what he was trying to prove to see what people would fall for, as more of a mathematical skeptical mind, but he was also into the magical and geometrical as well. So he was a fusion of both. One of the world's greatest mathematicians with the a squared equals b squared basically a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That was his Pythagorean theorem. He came up with all these geometric mathematical links to the magical world. And you see games like Skyrim where they basically say magic, but they are actually meaning high sciences. Magic is really an advanced form of science. So I find that interesting that a source like Crowley came up with that. He's also associated with a lot of dark magic, but that means his association with the experimentation thereof. And some people blame him and L. Ron Hubbard for bringing in a lot of the UFO age later on. That is actually not. It's true, but it isn't. Because you also had aliens here to begin with. You also had your 100 years disclosure narrative contract that happened in Eisenhower's time frame. I won't get too far into that, but it's re-upping on contracts that existed throughout antiquity. So you can blame all the other individual sources. It's one big rolling, like, kind of curse that humanity has been under for a while. But with this, yeah, he's actually true in what he said there. So I would highly recommend anybody does any magical practices, you quarantine what you're doing to your space and keep it safe. It's like when I did channelings in a rental house that I was in with other roommates. All of a sudden, others around me started to get sick, and because they couldn't, they were either getting communicated with or getting fucked with, depending on your perspective. And they started to get sick, barfing, vomiting, the whole bit. Also exacerbating some medical conditions, but also bringing about wisdom as well. So you have to quarantine what you're making. Like when I make our pieces, I quarantine them with Mylar and with other materials like the EMF safe material, like in the hat here. And you do this because you're also respecting not only your space, but the spaces of others as well. And that's true with magic. So the same with any of it. It's science and magic rolled into one magic advanced form of science. So that's essentially where I'm at, Aubrey. What else?
I just want to talk about a couple of people's personal supposed encounters real quick, and then we can probably bring a channel through and get some answers, and we'll hightail it to the next one. Let me go up to here. Get rid of that. Let me go right here. So this is from pleatedjeans.com. And 20 creepy Ouija board shows that have you jumping out of your skin. Like we said, whether you're a skeptic or believer, children's toy, a divine interventional communication device, one of the two. Here's some people's stories. Number one, I'm just going to go through 5, 6 random ones. Very first one, my mom and Aunt Lucy used one. I told my mom that my dad cheated on her in MX. She would never finish school because she would start working, and that she would have a son. She had 3 girls at this point. She literally walked into the room where my dad was, and he confirmed that. Yes, he messed around. I know she didn't finish school. She is still working to this day, and then she had my brother. So kind of like a family prediction event. Number 2, my friends and I played with one once. We were all about 16, 17, to make a long story as short as possible. I don't even remember what was asked, but one friend started chanting something unintelligible. The board sort of flung itself across the room, and the mother of the girl whose house we were hanging out in came flying down the stairs, screaming, demanding to know what the heck we were doing. We were in the basement. She had been asleep, but had a nightmare of a man who was literally on fire, flesh cooking and peeling, that yelled at her. They are doing something they shouldn't be. Number three, I fully 100% believe that Ouija boards are real. When I was in high school, I had two friends that would do all that kind of stuff. Seances, spells, candles, fortune telling, etc. The main focus was Ouija boards, and then we decided to test to make sure that none of us was influencing the outcome. So one of us would go write something down, a word, random numbers, letters, whatever came to mind, come back down to the ground, and the other two would put the Ouija board on that person's back and ask the spirits to spell what they had written down. It was right every single time. Even when one of us wrote down the most random iPhone generated password string of stuff. All right, let's just go random. Oh, let's go randomly here. I played the Ouija board that one you find in the toy store with a friend not so long ago. If anything is clear that you can never trust what you're talking with via one. One day, my friend and I talked to a ghost named Fee. They didn't speak French, we spoke French. And so we asked Fee if they knew someone that could translate for them. They said yes and went to goodbye when prompted to go get them. They returned after a few minutes saying they were back. When asking about that friend of theirs, it was hard to get an answer until finally it spelled demon. We ended the session right then. The next day we played again during the day and surprised Fee was there. However, Fee had had perfect French. At some point my gut was telling me something was odd about this, so I asked Fee, "Did you learn French?" and immediately went to goodbye. I personally would avoid asking questions that are too personal or about yourself, but from what I can tell, it is true. A couple more round ones. My mom and her friend played with one when I was a kid, and apparently I was answering really weird questions. Nobody else would know that, and the lights started flickering. From my bedroom, all I heard was my mom and her friend screaming, and then a week later, I found the board in the freezer. And yes, for some reason, my mom did actually throw it in the freezer. I don't actually remember all the details of that night, but I know it freaked my mom out, and she's a pretty chill person.
That is actually true. If you put something in the freezer, you freeze its power like that.
Oh, that's interesting. I was going to ask about that.
Old witch's trick. It's an old witch's trick.
Huh.
Yeah.
Let me do one more here, or two more. I'll do this in the final one. I also had an Ouija experience that involved information that only I knew. When we were probably 12-ish, my two friends were the ones using the board at my house, and I was observing. When they asked about who they were talking to, it spelled out the last name of the people who lived in the house. That was demolished on the plot where my dad built our house. I only knew it because I had driven by the lot with my parents when they bought it and had seen it written on the mailbox when it was still up. Not a common name. It also knew that the previous house was green. My friends had definitely not been there before. We also got other answers about them that I couldn't verify. Definitely weird. I haven't touched a Ouija board since. I never will. Let's go down to the last one. Oop. 20. My mom told me this story. When they were teenagers, she and her two sisters went to an abandoned house next door. They set up candles and started to ask basic questions. My mom then tells me everything felt heavy, like the energy in the room felt weighted, like you were sinking. She said that she saw the shadows move up the walls, but told me she was young and it was possibly just the candles. I asked her what did she ask the board. She got silent and said, we asked who was going to get married first. It said I was going to be first, even though I was the youngest, and your auntie Allie afterwards, but your auntie Jim would never get married. Sure enough, the prediction did come true. So a lot of life experiences. One final thing. Have you ever played with one?
This was actually ages and ages ago. This was back when we lived, when I was growing up in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we did play with one back then. And I know they put them on to kids because some nasty nefarious agencies out there are trying to get people to aimlessly conjure and not do the procedures and everything. But then other magical practitioners can do the destiny swapping and all that nonsense. This that makes the field more ripe for harvesting, pretty much in that area. But in Chicago, oh yeah, we did have one, and we did notice in that house after there was a lot of activity. But this was after, and it basically it spelled out that like that one testimonial about that person's husband being committing infidelity, pretty much. This spelled out also the same with our family, and it turned out my father was doing the same. at the time. This was actually before anybody knew about that. And my mother had an experience where my grandfather came to her basically saying it will be, he called her Punky at the time because of her red hair, Punky Brewster, the Brave. Basically said, Punky, it'll be all right. And then shortly after, I was found out my father had been cheating on her. So the board was correct, and I have no doubt that's true. But what or and whom are you speaking to? Sometimes it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, but at this time it really wasn't because that had been going on prior to that being used. But I still don't recommend it because you don't know other than demonic sources, you don't know what you're connecting to. Some people compare a ghost box to it, and can it get bogged down in the same way and conjure only dark things? Yes, it can, but only with repeated uses and in dark areas. Pendulum, can you, and if you don't open and close the circle properly, can it also be corrupted? Yes. Can tarot cards? Yes. To a certain extent, where if you don't open and close the circle, and if you use a deck too much, it can get saturated. Ouija boards were always aligned with something dark within the Parker Brothers version of it, I should say. But our experience with it, there was something true that happened with it, but we also noticed a lot of paranormal activity that followed in its wake, too. So a lot of activity followed in its wake, dark crap. So just because you get one correct answer in there doesn't mean that it's recommended for a novice or any other person until they find a way to break away from the Parker Brothers stigma surrounding it, and the multi-marketing and focus surrounding it, along with the Jinn and Draco Demon connection, Jinn Demon Draco Demon connection. But now, do I feel there's some propaganda out there? Yes, absolutely. So people don't dabble in any magic. Yes, but with that, I'd stay away from it for the time being until somebody creates one that's safer and that knows what the hell they're doing and confines it to that. And so, but people always, if somebody creates something new, people would always associate it with the current thing. So this is more of a generational thing while you repair something over multiple generations, like a lineage curse by which jinn and certain demons are associated with as well. Whereas you have to focus on the opposite end of a certain behavior or cut a curse from a certain genetic line, like what happened with Salem. There were some curses generated from that eventually those family lines went into the secret space programs and became super soldiers and magical practitioners and such. So essentially like the Empire in Star Wars, like Vader choosing Force-sensitive children to serve the Empire. That's essentially what happened. That's a bit of other history surrounding that. But yeah, that's the only experience I know of we had that we played with one that I went with my father to a place called, and my stepmother Karen, to a place called Volo Antique Malls in Volo, Illinois. And what ended up happening, that's VOLO. There's this antique mall that has 5 antique malls in one kind of thing. And you go from little structure to little structure. They're all interwoven and linked like one big like little base kind of thing with then a section with all the cash registers and everything in the center. But what ended up happening was I brought a recorder in there with me, an EVP recorder, and because they said they reported some hauntings that took place. Antiques usually that goes with the territory, but I went up into this one room on like the 6th floor of one of the buildings. It was up in this tiny little closet-like space that had some clothes in it. I'm thinking, there's negative energy up here. There's something going on. And I went up into this one corner, and I turned the corner, and I see a really old Ouija board up there. Very, very old Ouija board, like the wooden one, with the wooden planchette and the glass little planchette. It wasn't plastic like the new one is. This was the old wood and glass one. And it was like 100 some years old. Well,
that'd be kind of cool.
And I see this sitting there with the planchette out and the board leaning up against the wall and the box leaning up there with it. And they had it displayed. To the right was an old picture of Jesus. And to the left of it were a shelf with children's toys on it. That couldn't have been any more prophetic right there with the way that was situated. That they could have planned that out that way too, saying toy, saying religious. So they could have displayed it like that. But I went up there and noticed that all the energy was like culminating around this board, and one of those old Jesus portraits where he's like all bloody and he's like And then the other one were kids' dolls, toys, rubber ducks, all this other stuff. It was creepy the way they had this situated. And across from that were a bunch of clothes and a bunch of other antiques on the other walls. But in this little alcove, and there were mirrors around it too. This was really freaking weird the way they did this. And that's where I remember getting an EVP up there at the time. I'm trying to remember what it said now. It was basically saying, like, it was like dark portal, dark opening, dark door, something like that. And it was very quiet. It was one I couldn't post. It was so quiet at the time I couldn't dig it out of the recording. I could hear it though myself. If you have the training and the aptitude for hearing EVPs, you can hear the undertone of it. But I could hear it, nobody else could. So I had to scrap that one. I wish it had been louder, or if I'd had a ghost box at the time, I wish I'd done this, but that's what came out of that when I went to the Volo Antique Mall. But if you're in someone else's place of business, you can't be having a loud ghost box going, when you're.
I know, that's the only thing I'm always adamant about. People are just won't let you do what
I would
you
have
want to
used
do.
one in the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., but that place echoes like crazy. I used an Obelisk 3 in that one, and I was creeping people out with the Obelisk. But yeah, if you're going to do something like that, you have to be kind of nonchalant. And the EVP recorder was the only thing I could get away with, so that had made no noise. And so, but yeah, that was my two experiences with Ouija boards right there. Actually, third one I will say, and this was brief. Somebody was burning one time. And I did notice that as it burned, there was this negative energy and all these weird sparks coming off of it. Like all these, like you see on the 4th, which was yesterday from the time of this recording, but where you see all these little shimmers coming off it, because all the energy that it saturated in it was all evaporated off. That was it wasn't more of a usage for it, but it was more of an experience. But I do always say to people, if they've messed with a Ouija board in the past, I always say a revocation. It goes like this. It's basically, I hereby revoke any and all ties, bindings, contracts, entanglements, programs, strings, and agreements made by viewing a Ouija board and or usage of a Ouija board. Mirrored across time and space where appropriate is forever so in all moments, all sessions, and expressions. This ends any ties to a Ouija board. If people want to go through that audio there, but that ends all ties to whatever you've come up with a Ouija board, aside from the Dreamtime revocation, of course. But yeah, where people can revoke any and all agreements made in Dreamtime with any malicious being and or being. So if you say some of these simple things, you got to keep it simple. Essentially it's with intention. It's like in the game Skyrim, where you come across this demon and he basically wants you to set him free. And then you ask him how. And he says, well, it's simple. You just basically say my name and then say you're set free. And that's all you do to set him free if you choose to do it. And he gives you armor in return. So, or shows you how to get it. So that's essentially, it's based on intention.
Well, I've only done it once. I was probably 10. We made a homemade board. I can't say how it did. I was kind of on the fence about it. It's like that when you're young, do I look in the mirror, say Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary? I dabbled with it once. It was when I was young and stupid, and so I have no idea what the outcome is. But
I feel that you got rid of some. You've had some bad luck probably associated with it, but I think you've mostly shed that by now. So.
I hope. Well, I can't help but wonder though. Every so often. But
yeah, I don't feel it has any effect. My feeling is that you may have gotten some financial burden from it over the years. That usually first thing attacks is finances. Is usually the first thing. And any demonic, anything. And I don't feel anything, was a part of that. It may have tried to generate a lineage curse, but other than that, I don't, you can shed that if you want to make sure you do the revocation for it. And that usually snips it right there. Lineage curses take a while to get rid of. Ouija board curses, revoke it. That's usually essentially as simple as that with those. And it took me a while to figure out what to say for those two. I had to delve a little bit to find the words for it. It may sound complex, like it doesn't necessarily fit, but the reason you're doing all sessions expressions is because you're nailing whatever it was in multiple timelines that also it infected as well. And other expressions where it may have gotten other versions of you in other dimensional spaces too. So that's a thing. So that's why you see me jump all over the place. It sounds like it's non sequitur, like it doesn't fit, but it fits. it fits if you know that there's multiple dimensional spaces, everything everywhere existing all at once. So, and they could come from those beings. I believe one of his name was named Lam, or I can't remember the one that Crowley talked to, this alien. Uh, he claimed to not be from space, but he was from a dimensional space, and that's a space called the Introverse, where it's associated with dimensional. It's a dimensional space, but at the same time, somebody's interfering with what I'm saying. I felt like something was dicking around there for a minute. Basically, it's a space that's worlds within worlds. People associate with computers where it's like Introverse, like Matrix or holographic. That's you'll find if you look up Introverse online, it's associated with, or Introversal, it's associated with computers. So people are confused why I brought up a computer term, but it's a dimension within a dimension. There's multiple worlds existing right here at once with us, like a nesting doll. That's essentially, in a nutshell, what the Introverse is. Some say holographic dimension within a dimension, like the TARDIS on Doctor Who. That's where you get Introverse computer kind of thing. But that's essentially where a lot of these beings, 95% of the beings people are channeling are from this space, from those spaces. Some people say different spheres, like 1 through 9 spheres within a dimensional space. I disagree. They're not numbered like that. Like Marvel did the numbered universes. I don't believe they're numbered unless somebody has a card catalog or database somewhere I don't know about. But they're not really numbered like, oh, this is the 18th universe or the 8th sphere or whatever the hell. I wouldn't pay attention to that too much, but some of it I don't get why they're numbering them. But yeah, that's what I've been able to figure out. I'm going to get some interference, and we'll get to the channeling portion here.
Yeah. I was just going to ask.
I mean, I could go on for days on the different variations of crap, but
well, hell yeah.
But yeah, I get miffed at people that just play around, and then it's one of those fuck around and find out kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would recommend if you're a novice or anybody that I want to play around because this is exciting, just don't. Don't. So
would you like to surprise the people with who you're channeling today?
Yeah, this is actually interesting. This coincides with an episode me and Joanna did of The Lifting a while back, where we talked about some of the misnomers around Houdini's history. And he's the one, before the recording began, Houdini actually came through to me and said he was going to be the channel today. So we've been doing a lot of celebrity stuff, and people have been paying attention to the Lifting Q&As. So a lot of stuff associated with like the Diddy trial, Michael Jackson, several of them, But I normally wasn't into that whole scene, but some of those sources, Spirit wanted certain information out, and so only from the specific sources, Houdini was embroiled in some of that as well. So, man, a lot of cottonmouths, a lot of energy flying around. I can see when we brought up Crowley's name, I noticed there was some fluctuation in the energies as well. At first, I thought he was going to take the place of the channel, but no, it's Houdini. I got to look into Crowley more to make sure it's safe. To do something like that, you have to be anal retentive and thorough. Benevolent Harry Houdini, true benevolence with no conflicting agendas, is only invited at this time. Circumstances were appropriate as favors all sections. Okay, Benevolent Harry Houdini, you can approach. That's a rough channel. All right. Yes. I have channeled through him before. What he neglected to say is when he first encountered me, I was a ghost myself because of the injustices surrounding the spiritualist movement at the time, the falsehoods that were talked about me. You say one lie about a person and you commit an evil act such as murder that generates a ghost. I was skeptical. I was caught in the skeptical loop. I was actually coming to him more or less in attack mode. I was caught in a loop, you see. So with that, because him being a channeler, I associated all channelers with that movement. He is outside of all of that. He aptly named them the spiritualist or the New Age mafia. which is because the New Age movement created by your government was a lurch towards your New World Order and the New World religion. Before this, it was Christianity created and generated by your Roman Empire. Before that, it was Pharaoh Akhenaten, creating the focus on the Aten sphere. And your, as he would say, your Julius Caesar took the information from the Library of Alexandria and took it back to Rome. It is now its most modern regurgitation is your Vatican Library. But with this, at the time in my human form, I am more spirit now, but human form, I didn't know any of these things. I just know I was hired on later on in life by the FBI because they wished to stop this spiritualist movement, at least of the grunts that hired me anyway. And when the movement found out who I was actually working for, just like with any mafia, when some feds get involved, they basically kill the Fed and their agents, the feds and their agents. And this is essentially what took place, and the federal government washed their hands of the entire incident. It is archived currently in some deep, not necessarily underground military base per se, is just deep in the files within some of your Washington DC's more buried file folders, let's just say from quite a while back. But the information does exist in an archive somewhere within the federal government's databases on the fact that I was actually hired by the FBI to do these things. Before that, of course, my magician work and all the dabbling within illusion. You start dabbling in illusion, you start dabbling in both real and falsehood magics. There are some consequences. Of course, this has to do with skill that makes it so you build up a resilience. Your Ouija board, though, in particular, the topic for today, in particular, I did want to say this. Yes, there are real things that cross this threshold. It was also pre-programmed by your cultist types to bring in only one thing. Has it broken away from that spell as of late? Very little. But there is hope in there to be able to create a stable conduit with, as he said, another branding. Does not mean that you go and play by sticking what you call the fork in the light socket and its variations of penny in the light socket. You do not do these things. Even though you are curious, even though you are open to the ideas of magic, be careful with any magical variation you pick, such as your tarot cards, your pendulums, and scrying, and the like. It was based on a well-known magical technique, and with this, they bastardized this particular conduit. And also, as he said earlier, human focus has reiterated or self-farmed this topa behind it, the bad intention behind it. There's so much stigma, especially with your religious community. Should they ban it? Only ban negative practices such as certain negative conjurings. It's no different than if somebody has committed a gun crime or if somebody has murdered someone. There are laws associated, and I do see within your timelines that this is indeed a possibility if people wake up to the aspects of different aspects of magic and what it embodies and what it entails. So I can go into questions if you wish.
Yeah, so you kind of answered one of these a little, but to give people a little more information revolving this, if they decide to mess around with the talking board, and they don't properly open or they don't properly close the session, what can they do to get rid of a possible like malevolent attachment or something that might follow them through the board?
As he said, revoking the entanglements and such and the contracts and such behind the board, but at the same time, if you don't have the oomph or the energetic strength to release attachments, there are multitudes of trench workers out there that can assist you with this, such as himself, such as others. And I'm not trying to advertise this, but there are magics out there that can counteract old jinn curses and such like this. Sometimes it's a process, sometimes it's an instant, depending on what it is. You can also, if you do not have access to these things, or if the negative forces are making it hard for you to find these things, which this always happens, what you do is you visualize a flowing energy and light going through your body, flushing it out from head to toe, regrounding and regrounding under the sunlight on your bare feet, as he would say. He's giving part of this information, as well as he would say, reach out in the ethers in your imagination and cut said demon's head off. Yes, this does work. It falls into your imagination. But whatever you wish to create, make that co-creation stronger. And also revoking entanglements, but also in the belief that these forces have no sway or harm over you, no matter what their intentions are. Your purpose is stronger. Your foundation is stronger. I had a bit of that in the skeptical mindset, where I just didn't believe that it was real. In some cases, skeptics have been impervious in that way to an extent because of their non-belief in something, to where that belief of non-belief then turns into a form of protection in of itself. But in this instance, that didn't get me as far as I needed it to be, obviously. But in this instance, the practice of grounding and the practice of revoking those sources multiple times, just like they said with the yes and the yes, this must be a firm no and another firm no. Whatever they hit with the negative, you must hit with its polar opposite. These are this is a bit of some of the wisdom that I know of.
That's pretty good information. Then I got so talking, if you're a regular user of this, or if you just use it one time, there's prominent figures that pop through. So why do prominent figures like the demon Zozo, that has been popular, that has popped through the board, come through the board more often than, say, like the random person that, their cousin they lost that they're trying to communicate? They try to communicate with one person, but the demons take over, Zozo in particular, and all the other names that he's associated with come through and control the session. It's like the opposite. You're wanting to be in control, but then the entity ends up controlling the board.
Because the Ouija boards were designed to be that primary conduit first, but like I said, some of it has switched a little bit to introduce, by other people's intentions, reprogramming it to something more neutral and or positive. With the Zozo thing, though, this is a very special kind of conjuring that has taken place. This particular demon is a slightly more potent one that takes the form of multiple different, not only family members, but different cultist practices, different demigods, different gods, different figures, from dragon to human looking, to even from your Odin to your Thors, to all of these things. And he switches. He's a chimera type of, or chimera type of life form. He's encountered him before and was able to revoke his presence. He thought he was a dragon, even though there's a cult of a dragon out there. There's positive dragons and there's negative ones, of course. And there you have your Draco demons and you have your Jinn. With Zozo in particular, he is a form of shape-shifting chimera that then adapted himself to the board itself, because it is more of a, how can I put this, more of an as above, so below linkage. You have your Midgardian dimension, which is Earth, and you have the dimensional space by which he exists in, or the pocket therein. A permanent, let's say, entanglement was needed. All demons need an entanglement here. Whereas a sacrifice, be it animal and or human, allows that death link, you see. With Zozo, all he required was a word. All he required, not just with the name, that's not his name. What ended up happening was he needed a permanent inlet. This is why he invades mostly all, if not all, the Ouija board sessions, because he was through the duplication of the board. It is more of a copy paste. You've just now created more doorways by which he can propagate through, and all these other sources. But he seems to be the crown he calls big cheese, so to speak, because of the fact people become curious about the case, for one, is which he wanted. And he planned some of this out himself. I'm not giving him too much credit, but within the board's inception, he came to people within the movement that could hear him, and those that subsequently could be controlled to fashion it into something that he needed to come through. He's actually quite old. He is not a dragon. He is not a lion-headed type of being or that kind of thing. He basically takes the form of whatever the person needs to hear. He is essentially, like I said, a chimera type of life form. Yes, a shapeshifter, but more of an intention grabber. Not an attention grabber. Yes, he's an attention grabber or attention whore, so to speak, but intention whore, pretty much, by which then he goes with the intentions of the person by which he is communicating, and he takes that form instantly after he's revealed himself first. You will see him as more of this lion-headed, chimeric dragon type of weird looking thing. He's actually a creation from your Greek mythological period by which the gods themselves essentially not only created him, but he was one of those released from Pandora's box. So in that time frame of Zeus and Pandora and Prometheus, he's a more potent chimeric life form. This is important to a distinction from regular bottom feeders. He's not an archdemon, but he's in he's a different class of them. A chimeric life form is one that can shapeshift to one's intentions. Other demons have done the same through psionics. Then your psychic intention, your Draco demons have done the same. But think in your Greek mythology. Think of, for a moment, what Zeus would transform into a swan, a golden mist, things of this nature. He learned from his creators of how to do these things, and he became his own life form after a while. And then to teach, basically, not necessarily the gods a lesson because they were just as bad. Basically, to give his middle finger to those trying to recapture him, he then found another means to link onto, meaning the board, essentially a link to his dimension and your own, if this makes any sense.
Perfect. And just one final question to take this out. Do you believe that the classic board as we know it, we kind of mentioned AI, but do you think it's going to transform and evolve into anything else other than just a board that you can put in front of you? Do you think that piece of technology will have an evolution like some other thing?
It's already begun in your digital age with like your ghost apps and things of that nature. There is a Ouija board version of that in the works, even as I speak now, within your time frame. It will eventually evolve into a digital form, and also like with your chat GBT and with your AI overviews, people will begin to think that this is spirit, but at the same time, it is still some of these same sources. Even Zozo will jump ship into the digital age. Also, there is an entity out there he calls the mouth. There's a V2K aspect where humans created this, but unlike also just very similar to Zozo, the mouth took on a life of its own by amalgamating intention and basically focus to it. Therefore, you focus on it saying, shut the hell up if you hear it talking in your head. Therefore, it gains power. It's more of one of those things, like an inborn demon would be in human form, or like your Starkweather was in his consciousness, like you guys said. Similarly, and there's already demons in the digital age that have adapted to computer sciences and everything. So it has actually already begun with like your ghost apps and the like. But there is a Ouija board app. As I'm speaking now, your Parker Brothers is actually in the works creating this very thing.
Perfect timing for that question, then.
And the more you talk about it, sometimes loose lips sink ships. Sometimes talking about something conjures. You know, he says it's intention. So by the intention you're putting it, you can name something and not conjure it. But in some things, the focus is so strong, like with your Ouija, that has the stigma surrounding it. But we can get away with talking about Zozo because that's not actually his name. He just gave you a dubious thing. Well, now, if you name some of them, you can strip them of their power too, power in a name. But the fact that this is being talked about, the timelines can now unfavor or unfriend, let's just say, that particular agenda.
Very good.
Yes.
Very good. I appreciate the information. Thank you for popping through today. It's grand talking to you.
Yes, I thank you for this. People may think that this is not actually myself, but how do you know? Some people would say, how do you know it's not one of these dubious sources? And that is a wonderful question to ask. And I fully promote the skepticism behind that. This is a form of protection, but at the same time, discernment is key here. There are so many wayward voices right now. I am actually more in spirit, so I may sound a little different than expected. When people go into the higher realms of spirit, they might sound different, like he's channeled Michael Jackson, who sounds a little different, and various other actors in your repertoire currently with your other things like Diddy Case and all this other stuff. But with this, just know when you transition, you start to sound more like your oversoul library because you are that, and you start to sound different. Like he said, Joanna's brother came through and spoke. That's different than how he would have talked here. That's a natural thing that happens. Just know that just because you don't recognize a voice doesn't mean it's evil or false, or if it's higher up, some people will think that if it's something unrecognizable, that it's evil. It scares them immediately. Just know that just because something is unfamiliar does not necessarily mean that it is bad. And just because something is more familiar to you doesn't mean that it is automatically good.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you. Oh, it was a rough channel with him a little bit. There was a bit of turbulence there, but other
Pretty
forces.
smooth, really.
Yeah. That's why when I get accustomed to certain energies and beings that I speak to, that's why I stick with a smaller circle, tighter circle, deeper roots, essentially, because Houdini's a great energy. You just have to know who you're talking to, and he's basically saying the superior, not a superior viewpoint, but a stronger viewpoint would be skeptical of intentions. You don't always want to be skeptical of something's existence. You want to be skeptical of the intentions of whomever it is, and that's more of an important distinction. The same goes with Ouija boards or any of these other medium types, or type of boards or type of pendulums, cards, things of that nature. And that message can't get out enough. Discernment, 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 or discern, discern, discern. So, do you have anything else to add before we take this out?
No, I think it's a pretty good episode. I hope anybody that has wanted to dabble or has been curious about this topic learned something about the Ouija board and some of the figures that have dabbled with it and have been involved with it and created it and evolved it and produced it for all of us to be amused and entertained by. But that'll do it for this one, and we hope that you've been good, and we will catch you in the next one.
Yes, I hope you all enjoyed this particular episode, and this is where I now say you are now leaving the conspiracy sector. So bye-bye, everybody.
Adios.
Okay. We're at P Island again. This is from a different vantage point. I usually stood up there. And do a little ghost box session out here. A little windy. Hoping that doesn't interfere at all. So we'll just do Q&A like what we said on the Q&A show. So, hang on, I don't want to get anybody in film here. Alright. Sorry about all the noise, guys. There's a road right there. Usually that didn't interfere with any of this, but you know how it goes. Okay. Q&A time. What? Okay, let me rephrase this. Right. What is the main thing? Now, this is more on a personable level. People want us to try to ask things to this. Yeah, we'll go try it. We'll try it out. We'll try this out as an experiment. What is the main thing that is interfering with us right now? And I now open this ghost box circle within true benevolence and no conflicting agendas of this moment in time. So, here we go.
Xbox. ESN.
Yeah, I heard my name. Who's that, please? And why are the Lancaneers present on occasion now? I thought they were done harassing us. And in your opinion, what exactly are they? All right, any final messages from our benevolent peanut gallery? Isaac Lanavessa. All right, thank you. All right. Now, I am going to close this in a second, but I already saw some people starting to want to interfere with this a second ago. That's why I had to move away from them. They were going to come up to me and start asking questions and everything. So, I now close this Ghost Box session within this moment in time, within True Benevolence at this moment in time. So, it is 3:35 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Saturday, May 3rd, 2025. Thank you.